So let's get started. I am Liz Arrington. I'm the co-founder and managing director of the GCV Institute and the architect of the GCV Keystone CVC benchmarking platform. I will be moderating today's panel. Last fall, we spoke with a panel of savvy strategic investors and funds, and this time we are excited to have the opportunity to dig into what makes strategic LP-GP relationships work, but this time from the GP perspective. So we have pulled together a stellar panel made up of deep tech, energy, and healthcare VCs, all who have sterling reputations for really making relationships with corporate sing, both newbies and established VCs. So I will ask them to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes after I set the stage with some GCV Keystone context and data. So before jumping into the panel discussion, let's walk through a little GCV Keystone CVC benchmarking research on strategic LP positions. LP positions historically have been seen as a passive investment vehicle for corporations who lack direct investing skills or who didn't seek to build out a dedicated direct investment program or team. And this is no longer the case. Our 2024 Keystone survey data shows that now nearly half of CVCs do invest in CVC funds. And while some still do use LP positions as a toe in the water for learning to make investments, we see, many looking at deal flow expansion, and many are looking to use the positions in more sophisticated ways. For example, to extend the reach of the CVC team and access specialist sector expertise, expand into new geographies, draw insights from very early stage startups via seed funds, and of course, generate superior financial returns. But it's not just newbie funds or newbie corporations that are playing as LPs. Our data suggests that the percentage with LP positions actually increases with the maturity of the program and the size of the fund. We see that startup phase, or CVCs in their first 3 years, 43% take LP positions, where those in expansion phase, 47%, and those that have been around through multiple executive transitions that are in resiliency phase, 58% take LP positions. And the bigger the program, the more likely it is to allocate at least some portion of investment capital to fund investments. 54% of programs with more than 500 million in assets under management take LP positions. And some of the largest CVCs actually operate with a fund-to-fund strategy. Of those that have assets under management of greater than 1 billion, 42% have more than 10 LP positions and 46% more than 6%. And out of all the CVCs who take LP positions, 50% have more than one stake. And interestingly, our data shows the greatest use of LP positions among corporates investing in 3 sectors, all of which are represented here today. Healthcare, we see 55% of corporates who are investing in the healthcare space, not necessarily healthcare companies, 52% of companies investing in energy and sustainability, and 53% investing in industrial and deep tech. So, but capturing value from strategic fund positions can be challenging. It takes 2 to tango, and some GP strategic LP relationships are much more valuable than others. While corporates do look to VCs to provide the benefits discussed on the previous slide, savvy VCs also look to make the most of corporate networks, resources, as well as market, channel, technical, and regulatory expertise. But we've seen that effectively managing those relationships needs to be programmatic, with dedicated people and resources on both sides. 2024 Keystone research points to standing portfolio and pipeline reviews and topical councils as important tools for the vast majority. But for the more sophisticated and larger CVCs, co-investment opportunities receive top billing. And we also see in the case of some corporates, secondments of LP personnel to fund offices or portfolio companies happens, although this is most commonly found with Asian corporate LPs. Our recently launched survey that I mentioned earlier will allow us to explore some of these topics in more detail, so we hope that you will all participate. But in the meantime, let's hear from our 3 panelists who are living and working in the fund investment trenches, collaborating with strategic LPs. So as I said, we've got a stellar panel made up of deep tech, energy, and healthcare VCs with sterling reputations for really making relationships with corporate sing. So let's get to know them and start the conversation. All right, so panel, let's have each of you take a moment to introduce yourselves. You know, who are you? What's your personal role? A little bit about your firm, you know, when it was established, how big it is, where you invest, and how many corporate LPs do you have? Let's get to know you a little bit. So, Stephen, you're at the top of my screen, so let's start with you.
All right. Hi, so I'm Stephen. I work at Emerald. We are a really long time venture capital firm. We've been around since the year 2000. So one of the first around focusing specifically on sustainable industrial technologies. So we cover topics like energy, materials and packaging, water, mobility, agriculture, and food. We invest typically at companies that already have some level of commercial revenue. We have around just over 1 billion of assets under management, and since we've been founded, we've done just over 200 investments or deals, I think. My personal role as head of customer success is to manage the function that where we deliver all of the services to our LPs, which I will find out more about later, but it's a function that involves a lot of people around Emerald. And at the moment, we have just over 50 corporate LPs across quite a wide variety of industrial sectors, from energy, chemicals, heavy industry, materials, packaging, and water mainly.
Hey, Andy, tell us about Energy Impact Partners.
Sure thing. Well, thanks for having me on, Liz, and the GCV team. I'm Andy Lubershane. I'm a partner with Energy Impact Partners and head of research. Energy Impact Partners, or EIP, we've been around for 8-9 years. I've actually been with the firm basically since the beginning. And we are focused on, as our name implies, energy technology and climate technology more broadly. And core to our strategy is really that we have a strong consortium of strategic corporate LPs, both some who are CVCs themselves, some who are just the corporates investing directly with a strategic innovation team internally that has decided to invest in a venture fund as a way of a lever in their innovation strategy internally. We now have, I think, somewhere north of 70 corporates in our consortium. They really fall into 3 main buckets. One, and really where we got our start, is in the utility sector. So that's electric and gas utilities, and that's really sort of been the heart and soul of our consortium since the beginning. Over time, we've really expanded into a couple other big areas. One is oil and gas. So companies in the oil and gas industry that are looking to get exposure into emerging clean technology, to diversify their business, to learn what's coming down the pike, et cetera. And then the third, which is the most recent and has been a really interesting addition, I think, to the mix for us, has been the real estate sector. So large building portfolio owners really across commercial buildings, multifamily, light industrial, data centers, and that sort of thing. And we invest all the way from seed stage to growth and buyout transactions through a variety of different vehicles that we have. We have about 4 billion in AUM at this point. And proud to say a team of about 20 people actually we've invested in over time that I help to manage, that is really just focused on research and strategic engagement with our corporate LP consortium, as well as commercialization for our portfolio companies.
Great, thank you. Okay, Robert, tell us about 7Wire.
Good morning, all. Thanks for having me. My name is Robert Garber. I'm managing partner with 7Wire Ventures, based in Chicago. We are an early stage healthcare investor, and have about 15 or 20 corporate investors who are largely comprised of industry stakeholders, so health insurers like Blue Cross Blue Shield plans and the like, large pharma companies, and and then large health systems around the country. So everybody involved in sort of the delivery of care or the payment of care or the development of therapeutics represent our corporate investors. We're an early stage venture investor focused primarily on solutions that address chronic disease, behavioral health, aging, and vulnerable populations. So think managed Medicaid, but really with the idea of creating solutions that empower all of us to be consumers instead of patients. And so we spend a lot of time working with our corporate partners around this innovation and trying to drive a better experience for all of us on the call, because last I checked, none of us want to be patients. We want to be active in the decisions we make, active in our healthcare, informed. We want access to information, data. All of this happens in every other market that we interact with, just not very often in the healthcare market. We started about a dozen years ago, about $500 million AUM right now. I've been in the business now, this is 27 years for me as an early stage investor, all focused around the intersection of health and technology. We'll talk more about how we interact with our LPs, but they're a core part of our strategy as we think about changing healthcare.
Okay, well, let's stick with you. And why do your corporate LPs invest in your funds? What typically are they looking for?
Yeah, well, as won't surprise you, the large corporate health stakeholders historically have not been the leading innovators in the marketplace. And so healthcare is routinely characterized as being 20 years behind just about every other sector in the marketplace when it comes to innovation. And so a lot of them partner with us, I think, sort of three core areas. One is we spend a tremendous amount of time around thought leadership and developing unique perspectives on emerging markets and innovation and everything from, we've done recent work in rural healthcare and neurodegenerative conditions like dementia, oncology, weight management, innovations around pharmacy. And so we do a lot of collaboration around thought leadership. I would say two is really helping them think about how to reinvent their businesses to be more consumer driven. Historically, we have all experienced the idea that we have been, I would say, the piece of the system that is where things are done to you, but we haven't been the customer, right? Historically, we are just a cog in the system. And so all of the stakeholders are reinventing how they think about the role of all of the end users. And then I think third is they're all looking for either innovative solutions they can bring from our portfolio and our network into their core businesses to try and drive some of that innovation, and learn from us about, how do they really change some of these broken business processes, and realign incentives around change. And obviously a few of them have some co-invest appetite as well, but I think that's, for most of them, that's sort of tertiary. I think they're much more interested in figuring out how to leverage our view into the world of health innovation and trying to bring that back into the corporate enterprise.
So what about EIP? Why do corporations invest with you?
Very, very similar reasons, just in a different sector. Actually, Robert, one thing you said resonated. There's a parallel in the electricity world. Historically, consumers have been thought of as ratepayers, right? We pay our electricity rates. And one of the initial reasons that EIP was founded was a group of forward-thinking electric utilities who had this, shocking idea to start thinking of consumers as customers and working together collaboratively with energy consumers on how they can build a more bi-directional grid and leverage assets within buildings to support the next generation of the grid as it evolves. So, but broadly speaking, our corporate LPs, they want exposure to new ideas. They want insight into the emerging technology ecosystem. They want us to help them make sense of the noise because there's lots of startup companies out there. And so they look to us to do at least a first pass on what's interesting and what's not, and what companies have, legitimate prospects within the sector. And I would say, over time, we've really gone beyond that and in some cases, really collaboratively found a company that solves a problem that a big cohort of our LPs are facing, and then, try to build that company into the solution that they need. Because as you all know, sometimes startups, don't necessarily start out on the exact pathway that they're going to end up on 5 years later when they've gone through that sort of customer discovery. We've been able to sort of accelerate our portfolio companies through that process, which is really to the benefit of our LPs who want them to solve specific sets of problems. So yeah, really, it's those same reasons. We survey them every year, and the vast majority of our corporates say like, hey, we'd love to make a return on investment, but that is actually not our primary goal. Our primary goal is insight and understanding and trying to build solutions that we need.
Steven, so what's the same and what's different with Emerald? I think you're all addressing these huge societal problems.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly what Andy mentioned echoes around kind of our LPs. Really, they don't focus so much on the financial return. They do want the financial return. They want to make sure we're not torching their money. But really, when they look back on the relationship after a long period of time, they want to understand what the strategic value is. I think that, probably different to us is that our kind of LP base is perhaps much more kind of diverse. But the thing that really brings them together is that they realize that a lot of their industries are under transition or transformation. They need to be more efficient. They need to find ways to differentiate from their customers, and in our case, they often need to drive sustainability within their industries as well. And I think they also recognize that the startups are a bigger driving force of that change. But accessing the value from those startups isn't natural or easy kind of for them. And that's why they often come to us to act as a little bit of a guide for them to help them succeed in engaging with these startups to enable those kind of transformations in their organizations. And so what that means in practice is obviously a lot of insight around the markets, right? Who are the startups? What do the landscapes look like? What do the individual startups look like? How are they progressing? And then how to access them, right? Whether it's through a collaboration or an investment. These are also areas which are also sometimes a little bit awkward, or it needs a lot of education within our corporates around how to best do that. So in essence, it comes down to a lot of industry knowledge about the sectors, and also a lot of VC expertise as well that they would like to tap into.
So all of you have chosen to focus on working with corporates as a primary source of your capital. What made you decide to focus on corporates who are a little bit more resource intensive to manage, perhaps, than passive, more institutional LPs? So we continue on with you, Stephen. Why did you choose to pick corporates to work with rather than traditional institutionals?
So I think it was kind of coming out of the financial crisis for us, actually, kind of in, say, the late noughties, early 2010s, where, we kind of looked at this kind of landscape, and the industry that we're in really wasn't in favor during the financial crisis. But we noticed that the strategics really held on to it. And we kind of noticed that it was really them that we could really add most value to, whereas for the institutional investors, they really kind of fled away, right? So we kind of realized that first and foremost, they're actually really loyal customers because they're in it for strategic reasons rather than purely financial reasons. And that was kind of the light bulb moment for Emerald, where we kind of reoriented everything around what we do to serve kind of corporate LPs. And now we think of all the value we get from them across the entire kind of life cycle of a deal, right? We have this amazing network of over 50 corporate LPs. They are sharing with us their technology needs, their roadmaps, what they need for purchasing criteria. We exchange those viewpoints. They tell us about the deals that they're interested in. When we're looking at deals, they become we're very active in co-investing with our LPs as well. Most of the deals that we do have at least one of our LPs in. Quite a lot of our LPs end up collaborating with the startups, and they may even become potential buyers of the portfolio as well. So we set up our relationship first and foremost for the benefit of the LP and the kind of their needs, but often they're an LP because their interests align with us. So we get all of these kind of co-benefits with them. And it all starts from just this really valuable exchange of insights that we have on a regular basis with them. To give you a kind of a number to that, we have these 50 LPs, and each one we speak about with individual, we speak to individually about deals of interest to them. And so, in a year, we talk about over 5,000 deals individually with each of these LPs. And that's such a rich insight that also benefits our investment activities as well.
And a full-time job for you.
Yeah. And many others within Emerald.
Oh, so Robert, why did 7wire turn to corporates?
I think when you think about innovation in healthcare, right, we compare and contrast it to technology, right? And people love to use the word disintermediation in healthcare, and you go around the incumbents and you come out with these, game-changing technologies and sort of the idea is to displace the incumbents. I think in healthcare, it's very much a co-op model. Like until the market changes, we need doctors, we need drug companies, we need insurers to pay for it. And so these ecosystems in healthcare are sort of pretty well entrenched. And so we have had to think about how do we co-opt these partners to drive change, because we really can't go around them for the most part. So it's been a very intentional sort of partnership around working with those who have access to member employer lives, who are in the delivery of care side, whether it be in a hospital or in the community or on your phone or what have you. And so it's been sort of in recognition that we have to partner with these stakeholders because they wield such tremendous power in our industry, right? And as you can see, at least in the US, like every time anybody tries to displace any of these big players or these big sectors of healthcare, it's incredibly challenging, right? They have, I think the pharma industry alone has 1,500 lobbyists in DC. And so like every time you think about actually trying to displace somebody, you have to remind yourself of what you're up against. And so it's really the only way we're going to work to drive change is partnership. It's just the nature of healthcare, unfortunately.
So what about EIP?
Yeah, our experience was similar in many ways. I would say that our founding partners really came to us. It was initially at least very driven by a small set of utility companies who wanted to start a fund for this very purpose. So we had kind of 3 founding members of the coalition. That's Southern Company, which is a utility in the Southeast US, Excel, which is in the Midwest, and National Grid in the UK and the Northeast. And, I think when we got started, we thought, hey, this is great. We'll have these 3 utilities in the consortium. And we didn't realize what we tapped into until we started, finding more LPs knocking on the door because they'd heard about this fund getting off the ground, and apparently there was a hunger for it. We sort of we struck a nerve. So we ended up our first fund had, I think, a little, somewhere north of 15 strategic LPs. When we started, we were happy with 3, and that's what we thought we were gonna. That's the kind of business we thought we were going to be running. And frankly, over time, I think because of the nature of the sector that we're in, similarly to healthcare, there are these 100-year-old incumbent corporates, the utilities who control the wires, they control the network, the infrastructure that everyone needs to access. And when EIP was getting off the ground, there was a bit of a pipe dream that we would completely disconnect from the grid, that the legacy wires businesses were no longer needed. And I think that's very much turned out to be the opposite of the case. In fact, the energy transition is probably going to require doubling to tripling the electricity grid as it exists today. And so actually that's been a source of growth for us, because I think a lot of other corporates in the oil and gas sector, in the building space, other industrials have sort of recognized we need to be in the same room with the utilities who control the core infrastructure of the energy transition. If we're going to be investing in the energy transition, we need to work alongside them to define the next generation of technology. But yeah, it really started for us with inbound interest from the corporates that we still work with today.
Okay. Well, quick aside for those of you who have raised your hands, if you do have questions, please do submit them via the Q&A function. That's going to be the most efficient way. Let's continue with you for a minute, Andy. You have such a large base of LPs. You know, what criteria do you use to identify or source potential corporate IPs, and what is an ideal corporate LP look like in your context?
Yeah, I imagine this is going to be pretty similar across, you know, my fellow panelists here and other funds like ours, which is that the ideal LP is a really engaged LP. I mean, the whole point of working with corporate strategic LPs is that it's not a purely passive investment, right? We want to be ideating with our partners. We want to be engaging in diligence with them. We want to be having the conversations that folks here have already described. And so, you know, that's the number one thing that we look for is do they want to be an active partner in sourcing and diligencing and building great companies with us that can help solve their problems. And I would say, like, very specifically, to put a point on it, they need to allocate human resources to doing that, right? If it's just an executive who says, yeah, corporate venturing, that sounds like a great idea, innovation, yada, 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 like, it doesn't mean anything unless you've actually stuck a person with the responsibility of engaging. It doesn't have to be their full-time job, but you need someone who's going to be that point of contact between the corporate kind of core business and whatever activity is going on the venture side. And I would say even more specifically than that, what we found over time is you really want that person to not just, and you know, I know there's a lot of CVCs on the line, but you want that person to not, quote, just be a CVC as part of the corporation. You want them to have really good connectivity into the core business, right? And so actually we found that our best counterparts are people that, you know, they may be part of a CVC today or some sort of innovation platform within the company, but they have experience in the operating businesses and they have relationships in the operating businesses so that they can actually go out and find subject matter experts and operators for us to work with. Because I think there's a risk for CVCs of being sort of an island out there in the middle of nowhere next to the company that you're working with. And you know, we can't help an organization when we're just working with an island. So yeah, those are the kind of things we talk with our LPs about.
So Stephen, on the Emerald side, you know, what is your ideal corporate LP look like? I know you have a number of, you know, from everything from newbies to highly sophisticated LPs that, you know, take multiple fund positions.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we look for corporates that are facing urgent challenges that we are interested in solving as Emerald. And yeah, so we have alignment there, right? We're investing in things that are kind of solving their problems. And you know, we can get very specific about this at Emerald. Like for example, we have a fund that's dedicated to packaging, sustainable packaging. And this is a fund where, you know, we believe that in order to really succeed in it, you need to engage this whole value circle of players, of people who are producing the raw materials for the packaging, converting the packages, the brand owners, the retailers, the waste management companies. And so for a fund like that, we really think about looking for LPs that are across that entire value circle, because then that's how we believe we can really succeed in that. It's how we believe we can get the real insights into that, because ultimately you need that whole value circle to kind of push something like that forward. It's more of a transformational change. And I think the same is true for energy. The same is true for a lot of these sectors that we go into. Yeah. So that's kind of what I would say is one thing. And then, you know, similar to Andy, we look for, engaged LPs, ones that really have clout within the internal organization to push things forward. And I think ones that are have the intention to stick with this for the long term. We find that, you know, a lot of CVCs kind of start up after a couple of years. They may decide to stop or pause their activities, but we really look for the ones that have the intention to stay with this for, you know, at least 8-10 years, because it's going to be a while until from after you start until you really be able to show success and kind of big results within your organization.
So are you looking for LPs that will invest in multiple funds that essentially will follow on and stay with you over time?
Yeah, well, we have a slightly different fund structure, which is an evergreen fund structure, which means they only ever need to make one commitment with us. There's no re-upping within our fund structure. It's a bit of a unique aspect around Emerald. But yes, we want, once we have an LP, we really want them to stay with us forever. And our fund structure kind of enables that. And many of them, have the right to kind of leave our funds, but they don't. And but yes, but for us, it's also an incentive for us. We want LPs to stay with us for the long term because it also benefits our business in the long run as well.
And what percentage do actually co-invest with you? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so in terms of I think in the past couple of years, I think we've had about 60 to 70% of each of our deals have had at least one of our LPs in them. In terms of the actual percentage of LPs that have invested, yeah, I'm not sure of the number. So I mean, what we often find is it takes time for LPs to get to the point where they're able and willing to co-invest. You need a lot of stars to align, right? You need kind of our deal to align with the LP's deal to align, and so when we have a lot of new LPs from, say, the past 2 years. But I'd probably say it's somewhere between 25 to 30% of our LPs have done at least one kind of co-investment with us over the time.
Okay. So Robert, at 7Wire, how do you identify, source, evaluate potential corporate LPs? What's your profile of the ideal?
I think from a sourcing perspective, and one of the things that's unique about our team is we were all operators first, and so we have a 30-year network in healthcare of all the key stakeholders, and so I think that has given us a unique perspective on those organizations which are ahead of the pack and those which are laggards. And as you would expect in most industries, there are people up all along that gamut in terms of early adopters versus late adopters. So a lot of it has been through our network in terms of sourcing or referrals from existing corporate LPs who have gotten value from working with us. I think what Andy said is important is what we want to see is top-down leadership driven commitment. I always say there's a really big difference between companies that are innovative versus those that do innovation, right? The idea of the CVC in some extra office space in a corner of the business, disconnected from all the operating business units, is really challenging. And so the places where it works best is finding where there's C-suite buy-in to corporate innovation, and CVC is part of that, and that those people are empowered and connected and integrated with the core business units. Without that, I think it's been very, very challenging to try, and drive change. Because look, I get it. The people in the business units, like, they have day jobs, right? And they're just trying to execute against those day jobs. And they tend to see some of these innovation efforts or these external, investments as disruptive to their day jobs. And so, we need to be their friends and allies and show how we can make their lives better and help them achieve their objectives more easily, not be perceived as sort of interlopers. And you run into the not invented here syndrome in some of the corporate structures. So I think that's been the most important. And then as it flows down to is our corporate LPs who have dedicated personnel to sort of fill this liaison role. So working with the LPs, but their role is to help navigate the organization day to day. And they own activating that relationship and extracting value. That's critical. Those that don't have dedicated resources focus on sort of that level of integration really struggle because nobody owns it. And so there's not a lot of accountability. And then when you look and you say, why is there not better collaboration going on? There's a lot of finger pointing. And then lastly, I mean, I think long-term commitment to the asset class is critical for us, like particularly doing early stage venture. This is a long game, right? Yeah. And so you can't jump in and jump out and expect to get either the strategic value or even the financial returns by doing that. And so I think we're always trying to assess whether or not people are taking you know, for maybe for Stephen or Andy, 10 years is enough. For us, it's like a 20-year view. It's like you really have to be in this for multiple fund cycles to recognize the returns on both a strategic and financial perspective. And so now look, most of these organizations don't always have that long-term view and can't commit, but it's important for us as part of our assessment to really understand how they do this. And we try to avoid those that want to put their toe in the water. You know, I think those are the ones that consume a lot of time and they're in learn mode, which I completely appreciate. But it's got to be a two-way street where, you know, there's a mutual commitment on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's kind of dig into that conversation a little further and look at in particular how your individual firms are organized both to deliver value to the corporates and also to derive that value back from them. And let's start with you, because you have, you know, a significant platform team, I guess we could call it, to serve the large base of 70 strategic LPs. So tell us how you're set up and what your team does both to deliver and to take back the value from the corporates.
Yeah, like I said, we've built this team over time, and it's grown to about 20 people world in North America, Europe, and East Asia. And you know, we aligned ourselves, we organized this team sectorally, because, you know, are about different elements within the broad energy transition and climate space. So, for example, we have a sector lead who covers power supply. We have a sector lead who covers transmission and distribution of electrons. We have someone who covers clean molecules. And those people are responsible for a bunch of different services that create value throughout the platform. One is they do a lot of background market research and intelligence gathering and thesis development, often hand in hand with those representatives from our LPs who are experts on the topics they're covering. And actually, a lot of that takes the form of doing collaborative, we call them working groups, where we get folks together for, you know, day-long sessions focused on specific subtopics, hear pitches from companies in that space, brainstorm ideas, etc. So they do a lot of research, which we actually package up and we provide. That's one of our products for our LPs. We do reports on the sectors that they care about. They're also responsible for commercialization for our portfolio companies. So working hand in hand with the portfolio companies on everything from sort of iterating on the core product, feature development, product road mapping, go-to-market strategy, and then trying to facilitate business development between our portfolio and our LPs. And we're pretty explicit about that as part of the goal here. And our LPs recognize that, like, obviously we're never pushing anything on them. They don't have to work with any of our portfolio companies, but part of the reason they sign up is because they want to find companies that they can partner with. And so we're always trying to, in a way, we feel like a matchmaker, right? My grandmother would be proud of me. Like, we're trying to put people together and create romance between our portfolio and our LPs. And then, of course, the last thing is supporting diligence on new deals once we have these relationships with experts that we can call on. So, but I think the sectoral alignment has been key for us, and having a big team to do it, because it just takes work.
So you would have your platform team or your research and innovation team would align with the investment professionals on sector themes, but then each of you would have like a certain number of corporates that you would support?
Not exactly. I would say it's we have a sector that we cover, or the team has sectors that they cover, and then corporates who are interested in that sector, who want to learn about companies, topics, that's their point of contact to reach out about it. So it could be all 70 who want to learn about hydrogen this year, right? And so they go and talk to my colleague Eve Hansen, who's our clean molecules lead, in which case Eve's got a lot of work on her hands that when hydrogen was spiking in popularity in 2020, 2021. and that's how we've sort of decided, that's how we figured out how to divide the sectors, right? Is where are the big topic areas that we get interest from LPs on.
Yeah, great, great. So what about Seven Wire? How do you manage your corporate engagement, and how are you kind of organized to engage?
Well, I think first I should probably wipe the drool off my chin as I listen to Andy's platform team, since we don't have the luxury of having our own dedicated platform team yet. So it still is the responsibility of our investing and operating partners, as well as our head of IR. And so what we've done is created a programmatic approach. We're together twice a quarter with all of our strategic LPs or corporate LPs. One is really focused around thought leadership and content and research, much the way Andy was describing. And the other is really trying to provide, a view into market dynamics, pipeline, portfolio activity, trying to create connections between strategic LPs and not just companies within our portfolio, but companies we're seeing out there that may be solving problems that we're not trying to solve as a fund, which is pretty common. So in healthcare, we see all sorts of companies that are, outside of our core thesis, but address real pain points for the industry stakeholders. And then outside of that, we're usually on site twice a year with each of our strategic investors and their C-suite to talk about corporate strategy and try and identify opportunities for collaboration. So, for us, we're really trying to understand how do we have impact on their business, recognizing we're an ant on the tail of the horse, as they say, or a fly on the tail of the horse, but really trying to understand what are those core problems, particularly those that are shared by the industry stakeholders, and that gives us really a view in terms of where we want to spend our time. Because we do leverage those resources a lot in terms of diligence, sourcing, portfolio growth. And so we do spend a lot of time, which is, as Andy said, it's very time consuming and requires a lot of resources, unfortunately, from our team, but we regularly see a good ROI on the investment of that time when it comes to driving growth in the portfolio. So for now, it's still, we've split up the strategic LPs among the 4 investing partners. And so we each have sort of core responsibilities. Some of it is geographic also, because we have not just US CVCs, but also European and Asian. And so, it's a fairly heavy lift just making sure that we get the coverage we need. Over time, we've had discussions about sort of when we get to the next stage, building out a more robust platform team, but we don't have that luxury yet.
Okay. So, Stephen, tell us about Emerald.
Yeah.
And how are you? You are kind of the platform team, aren't you?
Well, yeah, it's actually our setup is a bit different actually to both the EIP and 7wire. So I mean, we have a core set of people like myself and actually a handful of colleagues who are kind of have the function of support the process around managing the LPs. But actually, when it comes to exchanging insights, we believe it's really important for it to be with the investment team directly. So the investment team have a lot of interaction with our LPs. We're organized also sectorally, so we have what we call sector specialists within Emerald. So we have somebody on batteries and somebody on packaging materials and somebody on mobility. So we have all of these sector specialists, and they have a lot of the interaction with the LPs. And that starts with a monthly call, which we have individually with each of them, where an LP may want to talk about a specific topic, and so they have a discussion with that sector specialist who understands the deals, who understands the market landscape, has been reviewing this sector for quite some time and worked in that sector. And so for us, that's really important to give the LPs access to people directly with those kind of specialists. Then when it comes to other programs, like, We have a secondment program, so you don't need a sector specialist for that. So within the kind of platform team that we have, we manage that secondment program. But obviously through that secondment program, our LPs are interacting a lot with our investment team through that. We also have programs to support our LPs in developing pilots and collaborations with startups. And so we do some of these as groups within some of our specific funds, or we do some of this individually. And so we have dedicated personnel that kind of work to deliver those programs, again, with the input of the sector specialists of our team. We also set ourselves up with a lot of investment in digital infrastructure to exchange insights with our LPs as well. So we kind of built an online portal, from scratch, bespoke, as a way to curate all of our deal flow for the LPs. So, whether or not Emerald decides to invest or pursue a deal with a company, the sector specialist will write that company up, will write about what it's doing, what the deal was, what its technology, some commentary on the market, keyword all of that, to make all of that information available to LPs if they're looking for recent deals, or if they're maybe looking to do a broader landscape as well. So that was another big area of investment that we've made into
That sounds very
supporting
labor
our LPs.
intensive. How do you get them to do it?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's part of their job description, and I think that why we do it is we've deliberately set up the investment team to be very large, right? So we have a very large investment team of just over 30 people, given the assets under management that we have. So we kind of resource the investment team also to be able to do it.
Can you talk just a little bit about about the secondment program? How long does a secondment last, and how do you decide, how do you pick the right people to participate as secondees?
Yeah, so it's a discussion in terms of the right people. It's a discussion with the LPs. So they often it comes from a place of they want to support a colleague in their learning around venture capital. So they've entered into this corporate venture capital team. Maybe they come from somewhere within the corporate. They're unfamiliar with venture capital. Maybe they're a bit familiar with finance from M&A, but they need to learn the venture capital trade essentially. And they want to invest in that person to learn it so they can bring it back to their organization and improve their VC practice. It's usually somebody that already has some level of experience, maybe manager level people, people that they see on kind of a growth trajectory within their organization. And then they come and essentially work with Emerald for a period of time. It can be as short as, say, 4 weeks. It can be as long as up to 6 months. Usually the agenda is like we run a series of workshops for them at the beginning, which kind of take them through our VC practice, how we source deals, how we assess them, how we evaluate them, how we manage our portfolio, how we take them right through to exit. And then a bulk of their work is they then join deal teams that with Emerald, so they get to see how they get to kind of practice on the job by kind of contributing to those deal teams. It could be elements of market sourcing, it could be financial modeling aspects. So they do that hand in hand with our finance and our sector specialists. They also get to observe, or secondees also get to observe our IC meetings. So they get to see how we prepare documents, how our IC kind of questions potential investment opportunities, and how we decide as well. So those are kind of the main things. Some secondees also take on their own projects, which we support them with. So they may have their own sourcing project that we then apply our investment process to kind of for them as well.
Yeah. Interesting. So I think, Andy, I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, you were talking about, the kind of the ideal point of contact within the corporate. So can you talk a little bit more about, where you would like to see that person sitting? Is it part of the CVC team? Is it that has contacts? Is it someone within the corporate? And do you expect them to commit other resources, like to piloting or to, other support activities?
Well, we obviously love them to commit to some extent as much as they're capable of and as much as they'd like to. More is generally better, but we do ask them, every LP to assign at least one person to be what we call the ambassador, the liaison between their organization, EIP, in the case of our CVC investors, who are actually a minority of the corporates in our LP base, usually it is someone from the CVC team. Otherwise, it's often someone from corporate strategy or corporate development. You know, oftentimes, like we do prefer someone who is relatively more senior, and we very much prefer someone who has a real history with the company. And ideally, as I mentioned before, a history with the operating business. You want someone who has relationships outside of the corporate venture team or outside of the small innovation team. You know, as Robert said, not just doing innovation, but being innovative throughout the company, right? And a big part of that person's responsibility is filtering the material that we provide, all the research reports throughout the organization, getting it to the people who can actually use it. And then also finding and identifying those people for us to participate in diligence and to participate in these working groups that we put on specific topics. And you know, I was gonna say one more note that, you know, Robert mentioned there's sometimes, you know, you find someone in the organization who's not actually all that interested in participating in that sort of forum, or, you know, doesn't necessarily want their day job to change. And it's really the responsibility of the ambassador for us to find the people who do want to engage with innovative new ideas and new companies, right? Because there are those people in every company, and there are also curmudgeons, and, you know, we generally are not going to work all that well with curmudgeons. So
is this captured in your LP agreement? As
yes, yes, that's it. In the side letters, there's a curmudgeon clause for sure.
All right, Robert, tell us about what you look for on the corporate side. You know, who's the ideal contact point? What resources are they required to commit? And I guess one question for all of you is going to be whether or not you require that they allow you to use their name.
Yeah, maybe working backwards, I would say almost all of ours have provisions in their side letters regarding use of their name and branding. It doesn't preclude us, it just requires us to get permission. And I would say 90+% of them allow us to, you know, in some way, shape, or form. And so I think, and some of them are, I would say, even more aggressive at wanting us to use their name, so it reflects positively on them that they're actually engaging in the innovation economy. So that's usually not a particularly controversial one. You know, in terms of the people, I would say the best situations is when you have people both from the operating units and from the CVC group, and so you sort of have a consortium of people, you know, that can help to drive some of the integration with some of the business units. So typically we'll see like a CVC person, head of innovation, sometimes a chief strategy officer. But then also you might see some senior managers within the operating units that, depending on the topic at hand, will, you know, be able to help drive some of the downstream collaboration. You know, for us, a lot of it tends to be around whatever the particular sector we're focused on. Like, so if we're talking to, like, Cigna is one of our large LPs, right? So if we're working on something around behavioral health, the CVC team will be there, but then they'll bring in some of the people from their behavioral health team of experts that are in the business units. And so, and we encourage them to do that as sort of, we're working on maternal health, and we bring in the chief medical director from that division. And so, you know, you really have to get those stakeholders involved to drive some change, because if you're not building, you know, sort of consensus from top and bottom at the same time, it's really challenging.
So your contact point has to have the gravitas to be able to bring together.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were having this discussion the other day about the difference in empowerment between different people we've seen in our CVC partners. Like, some of them have the gravitas and the relationships and the political capital, and those are the most effective. Whereas, like, sometimes people think of them as like the gnat, and they just the business people shoo them away. Excuse me, and so that's less productive, obviously. But again, that goes back to what my prior comment was about being at a leadership-driven innovation effort,
Right.
which is,
Right.
you know, hiring the right people and then empowering them throughout the organization to help implement some of this change. Because if that's not there, then you know it tends to fall by the wayside.
Right. So Stephen, what about from the Emerald side? What do you like to see
Yeah.
from your corporate? Who's the ideal point of contact? What do you capture? And do you ask that they let you use their name and their brand?
Yeah, we do ask to use their brand, and you know, they pretty much all do, and so they're actually all on our website as well. In terms of the ideal kind of contact, similar, we need a kind of a core person or group of people who are going to be able to consume all of the information and insights that and drive things forward. And I think I agree with what the other panelists have said, that you know they need to have experience within the organization, particularly in operating companies, because it's up to them to really be able to unlock and surface all the internal challenges and opportunity, the priorities that the organization is looking for. And you know, we give them a lot of. And the other thing that I think is really important about this is that we also really look for corporates whose leadership, so the C-suite, kind of verbally verbally communicate their commitment to CVC as well, because we find that when a corporate does that, it really actually makes the CVC's job much easier, right? Then suddenly everyone that they, you know, more of the people that they approach internally are going to listen, right? Because it's been communicated as a C-level priority.
Yeah. Great. Well,
Yeah.
one final question for all of you. Do you have one single piece of advice for corporates who are looking to integrate impactful strategic fund investments into their investment portfolio? And what's your one summary piece of advice from all the things we've talked about today?
For me, I would say if I was a CVC looking at fund investments, I'd be, you know, just make sure that you're really clear about what the goal is of what you want to get out of it. You know, is it somebody to help you get started in your journey? Is it somebody that is going to help fill a gap? Is it somebody that's going to help you learn the VC trade? And is it about ecosystem and network building? You know, and then, you know, I think once you understand what the goal is with your fund investment, then I think it probably makes it much easier to be able to identify who the best type of partner will be for you.
Good. Robert, what do you think? What's your piece of burning advice?
I think to be pretty crystal clear up front about what are the objectives of the program, and then making sure that you funded it properly, and to think about it as a multi-year funding exercise, right? And so sometimes you see budget dollars allocated in year one, and then year two, year three, year four, just sort of, you know, pushed off into the future. And so I think you know, the question is really making sure that this is a core objective that's funded for at least some period of time. You know, I would say the other thing is I routinely hear from our investors that that they thought it would be easier to do direct investing alongside fund investing, and that they've gotten burned because it's a very different skill set and they don't have that internally well developed. And so I would say, you know, maybe walk before you run with fund investing, and then as you think about building out a co-investment strategy, make sure you're intentional about it and hire the right people to do it.
Okay, Andy, you have
Yeah,
a final
probably
word for us?
Summarizing, make friends and get buy-in from the core business leadership who want to participate, and get buy-in early about, you know, what they would want to get out of a fund relationship, which they probably don't know about or even have a concept of when you first approach them. But as you explain what this could entail, I think many core business leaders will find it intriguing.
Right. All right. Well, thank you all so much for, I think, a very thoughtful and insightful conversation. I think it gave people a lot to ponder, and I hope that our audience of corporates will take this to heart and will look and think about how to more impactfully work with their LPs their GPs going forward. So I'm going to spend just a couple of quick minutes reviewing some things that we have coming up, and resources that I'm hoping all of you are going to find useful. We do have coming up our next webinar in November. We'll look at investment opportunities in the Korean market, building on global awareness of everything from K-pop to K-drama to K-beauty to technology leadership in semiconductors and vehicles. This webinar is going to explore investment considerations for global investors, and I will highlight that this will take place under Korea time zone. So this will be 9 a.m. Korea time on the 7th of November, which is 4 p.m. Pacific on November 6th. But as always, the summary takeaways and replays will be available to people who cannot make that time. And we do have a very busy fall season of events coming up. We have our Executive Leadership Forum happening in Menlo Park. We have flagship events happening in Brazil and in Tokyo in October and November. We have a GCV Connect event in Frankfurt, Germany, and then we'll have Connect event in Korea as well. And of course, our flagship GCVI Summit will take place in Monterey, California in March of 2025. And we also have a busy schedule of fall courses with the GCV Institute, both convenient live online cohorts of our foundational CVC investment programs course, which will happen in December. And then we have in-person courses running adjacent to our events in Palo Alto and Tokyo, as well as we will pilot a new one in Frankfurt, Germany. And if you're interested in delving more deeply into end-to-end investing and engagement platform strategies, the fall cohort of our mentored Lending the Value of Corporate Venturing program is kicking off now. And I once again want to urge you to participate in our Keystone benchmarking survey that we have recently launched. The data that I provided at the beginning of the webinar was drawn from our Keystone survey at the beginning of the year. The survey is completely anonymous, and everyone who participates will receive an aggregate summary report of all the data. And we really hope that you'll join industry peers and anonymously contribute your program's perspectives. The survey, again, will close November 15th. So I want finally, to thank you for joining us. Feel free to reach out directly to me with questions or comments, or for more information about the Institute or about our Keystone benchmarking. And if you did miss the full webinar, the replay will be up on the GCV site by early next week, as will a summary article chronicling the key takeaways from the session. So again, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, panel. We really appreciate your time and your insights and loved having you, and hope you will be back. Thank you, everyone.